Well, welcome everyone to Connected Learning TV. My name is Doug Belshaw. I'm Badge and Skills Lead at the non-profit Mozilla Foundation, and I'm subbing in for Howard Rheingold today. I'm going to be hosting today's call. This is actually the 54th webinar in a weekly series that started just over a year ago. So it's been great to collectively think through some of the challenging questions and share some great stories about what's possible when it comes to reimagining learning. So a few quick details about what we're going to be doing in today's conversation. If you're watching this on live stream, then do use the chat stream to introduce yourself. You can connect with each other, you can share resources, you can ask questions to those people who are in this Google Plus Hangout. And speaking of Google Plus, there's a growing Connected Learning community if you haven't joined it already. There's over 1,000 members, and we would love for you to join that conversation. And a link to that Google Plus community should be in the live stream chat right now. The URL for our public group notes Google Doc for today should be included in the live stream chat as well. And we really would appreciate your assistance in capturing the highlights and sharing resources related to today's topic, and that is how an achievements-based gaming layer can enhance the social and academic lives of students. So before our guest speaker, Liz Lawley, begins helping us frame today's conversation, I just wanted everyone here in the Hangout to have a chance to introduce themselves. So perhaps if we could start with you, Andrew.
Hi, I'm Andy Phelps. I run the Center for Media, Arts, Games, Interaction, and Creativity at RIT. I started the department where Liz teaches in interactive games and media. And I've been kind of a background co-conspirator on this Just Press Play project that she'll be talking about.
Excellent, thanks, Andrew. Cliff?
Hi, I'm Cliff Manning. I'm director of MakeWaves, which is a safe social learning platform for K through 12 students. And we've been working to integrate Mozilla Open Badges into our sort of free blogging platform to incentivize students.
Woo badges. Liz?
Oh, I thought you were introducing everybody but me before I.
Oh, well, let's do that then. I tell you, that's a very good approach. Let's just do that instead. Vishal, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm in the College of Business at University of Illinois, and we also are experimenting with badges. My day job is teaching IT courses, but we're involved in badges. I'm also the director of the new Maker Lab at the College of Business, which is the first of its kind situated in a business school. And we're looking at adding a gaming layer with perhaps badges or some other approaches to the Maker Lab as well, and also looking at putting it on a broader base with the undergrad population as well. So it'd be great to hear from Liz today.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. So we're joined today by Liz Lawley as well, who I almost introduced there. And she's Professor of Interactive Games and Media at New York's Rochester Institute of Technology. And she's also production lead for Just Press Play. That's a gaming layer for undergraduate education, and it invites students in RIT's School of Interactive Games and Media to engage in a playful way with their educational environments and experiences. So Liz, perhaps you want to start us off by giving us like a crash course in Just Press Play and the inspiration behind it?
Sure. I like that Andy has downplayed his role in this significantly, but Andy had a lot to do with how we got to where we are. But the initial seed for all of this really came out of my colleague Elouise Oyzon having a conversation with our students in the lab late one night, and they said to her, "We should get achievements for being awesome." And she thought, they're right, they should. And she went to Andy and said, our students should get achievements for being awesome. And he said, that's an interesting idea. Maybe we can flesh that out a little bit more. Maybe we can go a little beyond just achievements for awesome. And so we went to Microsoft Research and said to Donald Brinkman, we think our students should get achievements for being awesome, and we need to think about this a little bit more. And MSR funded us to think about it a little bit more. And when we came back with a little more well thought out of a plan, they said, let's do this. And for us, when we actually pitched this to them, Andy had this big slide in the deck, which basically said, danger, because there's all kinds of things that can go wrong if you try something like this. And, you know, I'm sure as someone who's publicly associated with the concept of badges, you hear a lot of the negativity. You hear a lot of the people saying what a terrible idea it is and how we're going to destroy people's motivation. And, you know, we are the devil incarnate, and we are going to destroy everything that is good and right about education. So so we went into it understanding that there were risks, and our biggest concern in all of this really did have to do with the motivation component of it, which is, were we going to actually damage our students' intrinsic motivation to engage in the activities that we wanted them to experience by adding some kind of external reward to it? And so a key part of this process all along the way has been to say the badges should never be the reason that people are doing this. The badges should be a way to recognize something that they did that they enjoyed. And if they're doing it just for the badge, then we're doing it wrong. And that's been sort of a guiding principle for us through all of this. What we were really trying to get at with this was sort of a multi-layered approach. One of the things we really wanted to accomplish was to make our students more aware of interesting, fun things that they could do, ways that they could engage in a playful way with the environment around them. But we also wanted them to be able to look at what successful students had done and be able to model their behavior on that. So if you were a freshman and you wanted to look at what kinds of things is that really cool senior doing, you know, what kinds of activities are they doing, what kinds of projects are they making, what's their experience of being a student, that there'd be a way to see that in a non-creepy, non-stalkerish kind of way. Yeah, that, you know, information that they wanted to share, that they wanted to brag about. So that was a piece of it. And then another piece of all of this was the sort of merit badge piece, the being able to remember and reflect on your accomplishments, to have this sort of digital drawer of memorabilia where you could say, oh, I remember when we did that. That was really fun. I want to do that again because that was a really positive part of my experience. So we had all of these things that were kind of mixed together in what we were wanting to do. And we were also trying to think about the student experience as having a bit of a narrative arc. The idea that they come in ready to slay the dragon and get the pot of gold, where the dragon is graduation and the pot of gold is that wonderful job at the end. And between walking in the door and this grand finale, there are all these what seemed to them to be unnecessary obstacles, all these things that we're going to make them do that they don't understand why. And as in any good game or novel or movie, later on, it turns out those things are important and relevant. There's a reason we asked you to do them, but it's really hard to understand that when you're in the middle of it. So we thought, can we make this more fun? Can we make it seem more like a journey, more like, slaying some trolls under the bridge instead of just taking a math class? So those are some of the kinds of things that we were looking at when we went into this. So our whole process was to say, can we identify activities, non-curricular activities? They might be things that are supported by what they learn in their classes, but none of this should be part of a class. None of this should be something that they have to do. All of it should be entirely optional. At the point where we're requiring you to do it, it's just one more assignment, and you immediately lost the fun factor there. That's, they've already got plenty of things that we ask them to do. We have these things called grades that we give as achievements for completing those activities. We weren't trying to replicate that in what we were doing. We were trying to do something that was very different and much more about the experience around the classes. Because when we looked at our best students, and when I say our best students, I mean the ones that have gone off and been really successful and happy in their careers related to what they've chosen. Mm-hmm. Not all of those are straight A students. In fact, a lot of them aren't straight A students, but they're students who consistently engaged with the other people in the program, the faculty and staff, the other students, that they took full advantage of the time that they spent at RIT. They were deeply engaged in their learning experience. And that's what we were trying to make people aware of, to create sort of a breadcrumb trail that would lead them to things that we thought would make them more engaged and part of what we were doing. So I'm going to tell you, you should stop me and ask questions and stuff at any point.
I found it really interesting. So I used to be a teacher, and I completely understand what you're talking about. It's like an orientation to learning, like the twinkle in your eye when it comes to learning, like having a bit of a fun side. And you know, the way in which I saw on the Just Play Press Play website, the way that one of the professors explained even getting to their office was in kind of a gamified way, in the sense of, first of all, you have to go through the labyrinth and get to the black door and see if it's open, and then it's just kind of I don't know, it's just a nice way of explaining the world and making it seem like some of that awe and wonder that you have when you're younger, which seems to be lost and drilled out of you by the time you get a bit older. I suppose
Well,
the question
oh, go ahead.
I suppose the question I wanted to ask was that I'd seen, when I'd seen you being interviewed previously by Howard, that you'd kind of disavowed the word kind of gamification, and I just wondered whether, just to give you an opportunity to explain why.
In part just because the word has become so highly charged. I'm not sure it's really a meaningful word at this point, and it's one that has people that feel so strongly about it being a misuse of game concepts that we really wanted to get away from saying we were trying. And I guess for me, I don't like the word itself. I think it's an ugly word. And I think that while Ian the Ghost's criticisms may be extreme of it being entirely about cynical manipulation, I think he's right that the ification suffix there trivializes in a way. It's like, we'll just toss in some badges and some points and poof, we'll have all the magic of games without any of the work. And we didn't want to imply that. And in many ways, this is not a game. Yeah, it isn't a game in any of the traditional ways. It draws from some aspects of games, but itself is not a game.
So what term do you tend to use? I remember reading Jane McGonigal's book, Reality is Broken, and she uses the term game mechanics, I believe. What term do you prefer when you're talking about this kind of stuff?
We've actually been staying away from game and talking about playful. That this is playful engagement. Right? That our students, and it's interesting because when we started this and we would talk to people, they would say, well, you're doing this for game students, and that's such low-hanging fruit, right? I mean, of course game students will play it, as if students who aren't studying games somehow don't play games, as if they are unaware of the actual percentages involved in terms of who plays games. And you know what I've said is that, in fact, game students are the worst possible people to design something like this for, because they will critique everything. They understand what good game design is, right? So we've stayed away from saying this is a game. What we've said is that this is a way to make this playful, to make the engagement more fun, more engaging, more interactive, and that yes, we're using what we know about the power of some aspects of games, but we're not actually trying to make it a game, and therefore the gamification term isn't really that relevant for us.
Okay. No, I got you. I think Cliff has got a question for you, and I also want just to open it up to Vishal and Andrew as well.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of, I like the playful description. I think that's fantastic. I was just wondering, this is maybe a stereotyping of activity, but picking up on your point about game students, a lot of the achievements I've seen are social things, to get students to interact socially or to do things and to value some of those, the sort of college life aspects. Is that do you think that's universal, or would that work across other courses? Do you think, or is that something specific to the courses that you teach in your demographic?
I'm gonna share my screen for a moment and let you look at the at my profile in the game, and I'm showing this. This is actually visible even for a non-logged in user. All right, come on, screen share. This window worked before when we were testing it.
I saw it just there, actually. There's
is it showing up?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, it's showing up.
So you can see in the top left corner here is the graphic that represents all of the various achievements that I've gotten. And the first version of Just Press Play used a different model in terms of how we described and categorized our achievements. On that, we had two sliding axes, one between things you do on your own and things you do with other people, and then another between what we called exploration and mastery, which was things that were sort of new and that you hadn't done before, and things that you were developing expertise in. And we found, in fact, that that model didn't work as well as we'd like. So over the summer, last summer, when we did a redesign, we rethought the way we wanted the achievements to work. And what you see here is the 4 quadrants that we ended up with, which is create, learn, explore, and socialize. Every single achievement in the system is worth 4 points. But the 4 points can be distributed in different ways. So they could be, you could have 4 points completely in socialize, or you could have 4 points completely in learn, or you could have them split between them. So if I select this particular achievement, which is a lecture that Kevin Slavin gave on campus in the fall, you can see that that one is not considered a social achievement per se, because our rule about social is that you have to have a face-to-face interaction with the human being. Attending a lecture does not require you to actually socialize with somebody. Just requires you to show up and listen. So the attending a lecture is 3 points in learn and 1 point in explore, where explore requires you to physically go to a place other than your room or the classroom. You know, so the idea is trying to get people out and about and learning their way around. So it's not just social activities, although we do know that social interactions are really, really important in terms of retention and in terms of engagement. So one of the things, you know, so anybody who's looked at retention research, for instance, knows that a major piece of whether or not you retain an undergraduate student has to do with whether they build some kind of connection with a faculty or a staff member. But if you simply tell the students to do that, it doesn't work. Freshmen are terrified of faculty members. They go in to talk to us only if they're failing. This is not a good way to bond, generally. So we tried a bunch of things. You know, we did things like saying, you know, as part of your freshman seminar, you must go interview your faculty advisor. This is unbelievably ineffective, right? It's the most awkward 15 minutes that you spend with a student in the entire year, because they don't want to be there. They're doing it because it's an assignment. There's nothing fun. So instead, what we did is we asked all of our faculty and staff to say, create an achievement for yourself. What does somebody have to do to get the achievement? So this is my achievement. You have to make me laugh. Not a little giggle, not a groan because of your terrible pun. You have to make me laugh out loud. Now, it turns out the harder you try to make me laugh, the less funny you are. So this becomes a really interesting challenge. But it's a challenge in a very different kind of way from what they're used to. They're used to being able to, I'm trying to bring my screen back on instead of the screen share.
So it's quite a complex thing, isn't it? It brings together lots of skills in a unique way. Michelle, I think you wanted to jump in here just to comment on what Liz has been presenting so far.
Yeah, Liz, get back to a point reference to your earlier comment, but in this particular screen you shared, the option for students to get points in different social, create, learn seems to address some issues about different sort of learning styles or different engagement styles. So that's really a neat idea.
Right.
And going back to your initial hesitant, that you're hesitant in using the word gamification. So I like the emphasis on engagement, which sort of brings to mind, when I think of badges and crowding out intrinsic motivation, one thing I keep going back to is, as you said, that they should enjoy what they're doing, and badges are just a recognition of what they enjoy doing. So the thing that keeps getting back to me is that when we try all of these engagement methods, or whatever badging platforms you use, if we focus on recognizing the process of learning, or as you say, with focus on engagement, we might do better than focusing on outcomes. So we, as you say, you're trying to gamify their experience, get them to engage with faculty or each other. I think if the focus is on getting them or recognizing the process rather than the outcome, are the mechanism of our gamification exercises, if I can use the word, might be more successful.
So I want to show one other, just briefly show one other of the achievements, because it's an interesting example of one that isn't a social achievement per se, but which had really positive social effects. And this is an achievement called Undying. It's actually a series of achievements. And when we did this the first year, this was a complete experiment. The idea behind this achievement is that if 90% of the students in the introductory programming sequence, and we have 3 of these, one in the fall, one in the winter, one in the spring, but if 90% of the students pass, everybody playing the game gets the achievement. So this is not the same thing as you getting your grade for the class, because this means the seniors and the juniors and everybody gets the achievement if there's a certain percentage level. And we put this in here as an experiment. And what happened was for us, in many ways, one of the best success stories of the entire system, which is that a few weeks before the final exam, that fall quarter, the seniors and the juniors said on Facebook, hey, wait a second, we're not going to get this achievement if the freshmen don't pass. And they organized peer study sessions. And in fact, they came to me and said, could we have permission to use the lab over the weekend to run study sessions for the freshmen? And I thought, sure, yeah, okay, I'll let you use the lab, trying not to levitate out of my chair as they were asking me. They had more than 40 freshmen show up for this session, which was entirely organized and run by the upperclassmen. And this is the kind of thing that as a professor you dream of, right? That the students will help each other, that they will see, that there's a shared goal. But the real win in all of this, and this goes back to the intrinsic motivation, is that when the quarter was over, the upperclassmen came back to us and said, we really liked doing that. Can we do that every quarter? Would that be all right with you? And they have, in fact, run study sessions every single quarter for both midterms and finals. And each time there were more upperclassmen who show up for this, because it turns out they really enjoy helping. And it's something that the game provided the nudge for. I used the word game, which I shouldn't have. That the achievement provided the nudge for, but that the actual activity itself ended up being the reward for them and the thing that they wanted to continue doing.
That's excellent. I mean, when I do kind of badge design workshops as well, because I obviously work on something kind of related with open badges, getting people to think through what are the behaviors and the skills and attitudes that you want, and working from there backwards works a lot better, like you say, than Vishal was talking about in terms of concrete knowledge-based stuff. Doesn't really work in terms of changing people's behavior. Andrew, I wonder if you can enlighten us on some of the kind of social type design stuff which played into the system and why you went with the structure that you did.
Sure. I mean, a part of the motivation that we had around this, or at least that I had around this, was at the time I was serving in the role of the department chair. And so what you do, at least in part as a department chair, is at the end of every quarter or semester, you meet with all of the folks that didn't make it as you're kicking them out of school, right? So it's a really pleasant experience. You know, everyone's very excited at that point to talk to you. And so you start to sort of go, well, why is this happening, right? Why are, you know, students that are bright, that are motivated, that have been successful, you know, in their academic career up to this point, coming to campus and falling on their face? And the number one reason, or the number one characteristic that we kept finding over and over again, is that they just didn't connect, right? It goes back to that you know, preparing for learning, I think, was one of the comments right at the start of the talk, and it's exactly that, right? It's understanding a university as a community and exploring it, and making it a part of yourself, and then being able to utilize the resources that are there for your own success. And so a lot of what we were doing with achievement design was specifically around trying to get people to engage with the community. And that's why you see this emphasis on social things and exploration and you know, similar style of things outside of the classroom. The other thing that we were trying to do, which I think is kind of cool, is sort of behavioral pattern recognition, right? And this comes up in achievement systems a lot, right? Is that over time, as you engage with an achievement system, you start to understand patterns of behavior. Right, you see this in Foursquare. You see this in you know, a bunch of the other sort of exploration badging systems. And the impetus for this for me was I had this student that I kept meeting with, who would do really great one quarter and then fail the next quarter, and then do really great again and then fail. And we were trying to figure out, like, what, you know, from an advising standpoint, what's going on in this person's life that's causing them to oscillate so wildly in terms of academic performance. And it turns out that what was happening was every time he made the decision to room with this other student, the two of them rooming together was a recipe for disaster, right? but he didn't realize that was the pattern. Right? He kept coming in and blaming himself for doing well and then not being able to continue to do well, and these kinds of things. And the ability of badges as reflective tools to surface these behaviors about ourselves, I think there's a lot of power in that, and that's one of the things that we tried to get to in our design.
That's fascinating. The fact that using things to augment the traditional kind of academic transcript and using those as a self-reflective piece is fantastic. I love that. Thanks, Andrew. There's a question from the live stream, which Liz, it would be great if you could answer. So they've said, can you talk more about the faculty's willingness to be playful along with the students? Did everyone jump at the chance, or was some prodding or persuading necessary?
Most people jumped at the chance, and it helps
Really? Wow.
that we have a playful group. That when Andy really created our department, which is, you know, started as a department of interactive games and media and became a school. We got to do what most academics never ever get to do, which is we got to take all the people who like to play with us, who care about the things that we care about, and just go off and make our own department. So we had a really good core group to start with who were enthusiastic. Not everybody was highly enthusiastic, but then again, not everybody had to be. It's got to be autonomous on both sides. You can't make the faculty do this any more than you can make the students do it. And you're not going to get everybody. You're never going to have a system that 100% of the people love and that 100% of the people engage in. But what hopefully you can do is create something that works for enough people that it has network effects. You know, and I see a sidebar question from Vishal asking if it's only faculty in our department. And yes, as we've been going through the process of testing this, we have kept it entirely within our department. Now, you should recognize from a scale standpoint that saying it's within our department means that we're dealing with about 900 students and over 20 faculty members. So this is not a small N that we're working with, but it allowed us to work with a population that already had social bonds and social ties, but it also allowed us to create content that was specific to our student base. And so there are certain kinds of activities, especially in the create and learn areas, that are very much about our students, about the kinds of things that they like to do. If, you know, we have achievements for going to the National Museum of Play and trying old video games and taking a picture of yourself with them. That makes perfect sense if you've got students who are learning game history and you want them to be aware of what the museum has and you want them to know old games. But it wouldn't necessarily make sense, at least as a learning activity, for somebody in criminal justice. So one of the things we'll be doing when we build the documentation over the summer for the extensible version of this is to say, here's what you need to think about. And actually, John, back to what you were saying, I'm going to put up one slide real quick, and then I'll go back to the video. This was a huge piece of what we talked about, right? Is these 3 questions informed everything that we were doing, and it got applied to every single individual achievement. If you couldn't answer these questions about an achievement that you were proposing, it didn't go in the system. It was that simple, because we needed to be sure that we were thinking about what were those behaviors, what were those feelings of competence, what are the things you want people to be able to remember and reflect on. And those will not be the same for every group of students. And that's why we're never going to be able to provide a packaged version of this that you just drop into your environment and it works. There's going to have to be a lot of work from any organization that wants to implement this to really think about the nature of the achievements that make sense for their students. And while we can provide documentation and best practices and guidelines saying, here are examples of things that we used, and here's ways that you could adapt this in your own environment, it's still going to require a commitment on the part of people familiar with students and the community that they're working with to build the right set of content.
It sounds from what you're saying like there's a great deal of personality involved, there's a great deal of context involved, and also a great deal of change management involved, and like strategically looking at people who aren't usually the early adopters, the people who have got the kudos within the the faculty or whatever, and going with them so they have the network effect as being an influencer.
Absolutely.
Cliff, have you got a question about K-12 and schools, I think?
Yeah, we work. It's fascinating hearing all the different things, and there's a lot of parallels in the work which we're doing with K-12, working with schools and developing open badge systems and badge systems there. I was just wondering as to get your take on picking up on that point of how it does need to be adapted into other settings and what some of the considerations, what your thoughts might be on how it might fit, or what considerations might need to be applied to K-12 settings. Would that same exploratory and playfulness work within K-12 in your view?
I think it would absolutely work in a K-12 environment. You'd need to rethink what some of the various kinds of activities were, but I think the core approach that we're taking here would work at any level, really, that it's about going back to those questions, right? What are the behaviors that we're trying to reward and encourage? What kinds of feelings of competence do we want our students to have? And what do we want them to be able to remember and reflect on? And you can take that really in any context. And there's very little that's in our system that I would say is really specific to a college environment. Some of the very specific activities that involve you going off and doing things on your own, those might be harder to adapt, but versions of them could absolutely work in a K-12 environment.
It's something that's just thinking about, so you said about part of the reason for this was the students needed that orientation to the higher education environment and to be a bit more self-directed and self-learning. I'm just thinking as badges and approaches like this move down into K through 12, and we're already seeing students taking on that sort of mentoring role through badges where they've earned a badge and they want to help another student to earn that badge as well. We're seeing that with 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds in the schools that we're working with. It's going to be interesting to see how that will shift your intake of students further down the line as well, and how that might then adapt from there. I love the idea of the group badge as well, where 90%, was it the undying badge that you had? And I'm thinking how we might be able to apply that into some of the school settings that we work with. I think that could be really getting that teamwork idea as well.
I think Vishal's got a question about just like why you decided to kind of roll your own solution. Vishal, do you want to just unmute and verbalize that was in the chat?
Sure. So Liz just wondering how Just Press Play is different than, let's say, commercial engagement platforms, which might be easier to adopt for other schools or even K through 12.
Well, first of all, ours is open source, not commercial, so that's a pretty big difference right there. Nobody's going to have to pay to use this or implement it, and that was non-trivial for us. We also really wanted some control over the back end. We wanted to be able to look at the very beginning. We had actually hoped for much tighter integration with some of our university's information systems, and we're starting to make baby steps on that. So, for example, we're building integration into the library system right now, where if a student checks out, we'll have, for example, a list of magic books. And if you happen to check out a magic book, you'll suddenly get the achievement. And the magic books might be things related to classes, but they also might be things, for example, if we have a guest speaker on campus, maybe a book by the guest speaker could become a magic book. Or there are all kinds of ways that we could play around with the magic book concept, but there are a bunch of other things associated with the library system that we're building in. So we wanted both control over the back end and control over the structure. This idea of being able to build our own visualizer, being able to have fine-grained control over what was public and what was private, because we're dealing in some cases here with stuff that could be considered within the purview of FERPA. Right, that there are, and so by keeping this all as an internal system where we had control over it and we could allow the students to choose on their own what information they wanted to share, that was also extremely important for us.
Okay, thank you.
Liz, the $64 million question for me as someone who works on open badges is, to what extent the achievements which are unlocked by students within your immediate environment can be shared outside of that environment?
We are, so when a student creates an account on the system, they immediately get taken to a profile management page, which allows them to decide what their level of privacy is. By default, only other players, only people they have defined as friends within the game can see their achievements or their profile. The other two levels of access are to allow any registered user, anybody who's logged into the system, to be able to see your activities, or to make your profile and your achievements public. We don't allow a fine-grained level of, I want to share this achievement publicly versus that achievement, but we give them the option of being able to share at different levels. And we do have an achievement associated, a social butterfly achievement with making your information public, which is something we struggled with a little bit. We didn't want to make people feel bad for not sharing, but on the other hand, we felt like there was some real value to being able to let people show off their collection of activities and things. So the things I've been showing you actually in the screen share are part of my public profile. You can see all of my achievements. You can see my profile. What we are in fact over the summer probably going to be talking with you about how we integrate in with the open badges, because that's something we'd very much like to do. And the other thing that we'll be rolling out actually probably in the next week is an add this share button that'll be on every single earned achievement if you have made your achievements public. So if you've switched your profile to public, the share button will appear on any achievement that you have completed to allow you to share it out to Facebook, to Twitter, to Tumblr, to your own blog, if you would like to do that. So,
and the value
those
of,
are the, go ahead.
Sorry, the value of integrating with the open badge infrastructure, presumably in your context, is you can take the badges that you've earned in your particular system and you can display them on profiles all around the web, and then you've got a link back to that particular profile on the, yeah, okay.
Right, which is why we want to do it.
Excellent. Well, look, I very much look forward to talking to you over the summer. Right, Cliff, I think you had another question as well, a couple of questions actually. Do you want to verbalize those?
Yeah, a couple of questions about the other kind of consumers of the badges and the creators of them. So one was the students themselves. How much input have they had in creating of the achievements and the missions? You're saying staff could create missions that that students had to complete, and did you devolve that down to student level? Have they created their own missions? And do you talked about seniors having a role within that as well?
Yep. So there's multiple layers to that. First of all, almost all of the development, this has been done with many students involved in the development process. One of the great things about having a game design and development program is we can hire our own students to do the development. And so the students, I actually ran a class during the initial development of the game, and the class was very deeply involved in creating all of the initial content for the system. But one of the things that we did this year that's different from what we did last year is we launched with forums enabled in the fall, and we also put in an achievement for suggesting an achievement that got put into the system. And they would suggest it in the forums, and then we've had a series of town hall meetings where we invite people to attend, and we go through the list of things that have been proposed, and we talk about, should this be added? What would be the advantage? What would be the disadvantage? And it's been really helpful to make that transparent. So, for example, one suggestion a student had was, I'd like to get an achievement for getting straight A's. And I was able to share with them that while I love the idea of it, that's hugely problematic from a student record standpoint, right? Because even if you're choosing to share that, what does it say about the people who didn't get the achievement, right? You're now saying they didn't get straight A's, and that's actually legally kind of iffy. But what we worked out with them instead is I had overheard some students talking about the dean's list and saying that they didn't really care that they were on the dean's list because they don't know the dean. They said, wouldn't it be cool if Andy had a list and they could be on Andy's list? And I thought, I could do that. So we created an Andy's List achievement. And if you made the Dean's List and came to the reception for the Dean's List, we would put you on Andy's List, and you could have that as one of your achievements. So in that sense, the students have been involved. What we have tried to stay away from is too much sort of wholesale, let me just toss an achievement into the system. Because for multiple reasons. One is that some of the achievements could be deeply problematic, and having a way to be able to police that was too much of a challenge. But another was we didn't want to overwhelm the system with being able to find the things that had value and that really met our requirements for what does a good achievement look like. What we're doing instead, and this won't be implemented until the summer, but we're in the process of writing the code for it now, is we have, in addition to achievements, we have quests, and quests are collections of achievements. What we intend to implement over the summer is user-generated quests. So anybody could put together their own collection of, this is my set of things that I think every student should do. And that's where we'd like to use both our current students and also our alumni, because we have some really amazing alumni. I mean, we have people like John Ressig as alumni, right? So I want a John Ressig coding hero series of achievements. I want John to pick them, and I want him to implement them in the system so that people can go through and do it. But then anybody could put those together. So the user-generated content, rather than it being achievements, becomes a curation of achievements, my set of things that I think are particularly good. So that's how we've tried to address the whole idea of engaging our students.
So that's like, in my world, kind of badge pathways and playlists, yeah? So ways through particular content. So as well as being able to say, this is the kind of stuff you need to pay attention to, this is the stuff I think which is important, would students be able to have access to like a achievement or badge designer? Would they be able to award, you know, in the live stream they're saying, have you considered allowing students to assign or reward badges to each other? Is that the kind of thing you're suggesting?
We are doing a little bit of that. So for example, when the students decided to run their own study group, we created a study club badge, which was, you know, the first rule of study club is you don't talk about study club, and a bar of soap, and, you know, but we thought we don't really want our faculty to have to come in and hang out with them when they're doing this peer study session. So instead what we did is we gave certain students the ability to assign that achievement. And that was more difficult for us to do last year. This year, one of the core mechanics for assigning achievements is that, let's see if I got my keys here someplace, and I can show you what. Nope, I don't have my keys. All right, so we have this little keychain with a QR code, which you can print out from your profile. Every user has a unique QR code, which is actually an encoding of their profile URL. But at the end is their user ID. All of our faculty and staff have an app, either an Android or an iOS app, that they can use to scan the QR code in and assign the achievement. Andy, did you find yours? I wasn't paying attention. There it is. That's the Just Press Play QR code thing. So they can print that out on a piece of paper, they can have it on their phone, or they can come by the office and get a keychain. But what this means is that we can also make that app available to individual students and allow them to have the ability to assign just a single achievement, because our administrative interface allows us to say user X can assign the following achievements. So the kids who run the study session only have the ability to assign the achievement for the study session, whereas I have the ability to assign anything in the system whatsoever. So that does allow us to use students to assign some achievements, but we haven't done that with too many of the achievements yet.
Cool, okay. So inevitably you're going to get some pushback from, I don't know, like parents or someone within your university, and there's also going to be some people who are saying, well, where's the tangible outcomes here? Where's like the concrete things? Where's your metrics? Where's your key performance indicators? Yeah. So how have you dealt with those kind of naysayers?
Given what we're trying to do, which is increase engagement, we've been looking at it from much more of a qualitative assessment process than quantitative. So what we did last year is we actually had a number of doctoral students from the University of Wisconsin-Madison who came and did in-depth interviews with our students in the fall. They interviewed both students who had been active in interacting with the system, and also students who had not, to talk to them about why didn't they engage and what was off-putting about it or uninteresting about it. And some of that got written up and presented in a GLS paper, but one of the things that we're still trying to separate, which is at this point almost impossible to separate, is is how much of what works and doesn't work is around the interface and the technology, and how much of it is around the content and the concept. And it's very, very hard to tease those things apart, because we had a lot of feedback from students when we had problems with the system at the very beginning, who said, it's not reliable, I don't like it, I don't want to play. There are also things that we're seeing right now in terms of needing better ways to share this information out, because they forget about it. So a lot of these things are minor tweaks from a technology standpoint that we expect are going to have significant impact in terms of adoption and impact. So it's very hard for us right now to say, well, now we're going to measure it. Right? Because at this point, this is still experimental, right? We're still tweaking and playing and building this thing. And it's really, I think, not until we get to the end of this summer when we have something that's been through enough testing and iteration and refinement that we can put it out there and say, okay, now let's see if we can move the needle in any meaningful way in terms of retention, in terms of participation in activities, things like that.
Yeah, because I suppose the difficulty is you need some kind of control group, but it'll be very different to control for all of the different factors that are involved there.
Right.
Cliff, I think you had a question to follow up on that about employers.
Yeah, it's just kind of the other side of, we talked about students having some input, and kind of at the other end, I was wondering, you talked about the alumni, and the other natural part of that is employers. So I was just wondering, have you, A, had input and feedback from potential employers that your students go on to? And have you, maybe it's too early to tell, but have they seen any impact? Are they valuing students who have been through this more? Are they more employable? Because working in the K through 12, that's the question that all the students ask us around the badges and why bother. It's the why bother question for all of the students, not from a research point or a return on investment from the school's point of view, but from the student's point of view. Is it going to help them at K through 12 get into college or get a job? So I'm just wondering what input you've had from potential employers on that.
Andy, you want to take that?
Sure. We haven't had employers come to us and say, we want to hire a whole bunch of students that have earned badge X. And I think that's probably because, the particular badges are not directly about skills or experiences that are directly sort of job relevant. But what you often get in talking to employers is they want, how many employers walk through your door and say, we really want students that are great communicators, that work well in teams, that are natural born leaders, that are, have experiences, coordinating and running groups of other students in technical work, that kind of thing. And to the extent that a lot of the badges actually surface those skills, I think that there is some broad potential, right, for them to sort of speak to the kinds of experiences that our students have had. The example that Liz gave of the seniors walking in and saying, can we run a study session, right? Those are exactly, that's a story that I will tell to employers when they're on campus, and the reaction is, we want to talk to those students, right? Because anyone that's going to be proactive, that's going to try to make an organizational change, for the betterment of the wider community, right? Of course you want them on your dev team, right? Like that's exactly who the kinds of folks that employ our students are going to be after. So it's, it's not at the iconic level of the badge yet, but I think that's it's absolutely intrinsic to the kinds of things that we're engaging our students with and helping them prepare for the way that they're going to interact in industry.
This section of the conversation really reminds me of Studio Passport by Purdue University, because they're not doing the same kind of things as you are in terms of the social aspects, but what they have got, I'm getting some feedback from somebody. Sorry, Bishop, I'm just muting you. They've thought about the whole kind of value chain, and so what they've got is when people are going to their employers, and their employers say, well, what are these achievements, what are these badges. The iPad app kind of allows them to show the evidence behind the badge and behind the achievement and that kind of thing. So they're not doing the social level of learning that I think you are. They're much more focused on the badge. But it might be a really good idea to talk to people like Kyle Bowen if you've never met him before, and people like that, because it seems like you're in the same direction of travel, certainly.
Yeah, okay, I'm just pulling that up now. Thanks for the pointer to that.
Well, Kyle's a fantastic guy, and he's also used to be an illustrator, so his slide decks are always beautiful as well.
Yeah, the website's gorgeous.
So we're 5 minutes away from the end of the hour now, so I'd love just to kind of wrap up by asking people's final thoughts. Vishal, would you like to kick us off with that, or I'm happy for anyone to just jump in?
Sure, I can share some thoughts. So in terms of, great you brought up the passport at Purdue. So we tried that, and it's a really nice platform, but sure, it's focused on badge creation and, challenge creation, and it's already integrated with open badges. But I think you can use that platform in a similar way to what Just Press Play offers. So that's a good option for people to try out as well. Just in terms of closing thoughts, I think it's Liz, it's a great idea to develop it yourself because it allows you to integrate with your systems, perhaps with a bit more control, and structure the back end and the front end more suited to your workflows or your students. So I think it's a good option, and we look forward to it being available for all of us to try.
Cool. Andy, Cliff?
I can.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's interesting. There's a lot of parallels in the work which we're doing in K through 12, and I picked up some great ideas like the team working type badge and that. Looking at badges in the 4 different quadrants and how they map across those and awarding points is a really interesting way to go. And I think one of the strongest things that's come throughout the whole conversation really is it's the design of the badge and how the badge is designed that really leads to its value. It's not the intrinsic extrinsic kind of discussion, and it's how you build that in, those points that you raised from there. And you've obviously put a lot of thought into that and balanced out those 4 quadrants and how they meet with your students' overall aims and that kind of stuff. I suppose the challenge for all of us is as more and more institutions and teachers and different organizations start to create their own badges, if they're just creating small, easy wins that are extrinsic, that are just collecting, then maintaining that quality is going to be something, and you've done that by you've maintained that within the staff and the faculty, designing the badges and introducing some ownership to the students. But so that's going to be the challenge for all of us, I think, going forward. But I think there's some fantastic examples and some good knowledge, it seems, being built up. So hopefully some good models of practice that maybe badge designers can earn badges for good badges. So we get to
I think that's a really good idea, actually. It's like the difference between replicating an existing system and kind of augmenting that system with something which adds value. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Andy, have you got any closing thoughts before I just hand over to Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would add to the discussion is just, in what we've learned to date, right, is this critical separation between technology platforms. I mean, we built our tech stack to interface with RIT's behemoth of technology that exists on campus, but there's convergence happening all over the place in terms of the technology and being able to share stuff out and social systems. And I think the stuff that Mozilla is doing is a great sort of leader in that space, and there's going to be more, and there's going to be more things tied together. But that doesn't offset, at least right now, that doesn't offset for understanding the local community of learners that you're working with, right? And having somebody on the ground and engaged in that community that is informing the design of what that looks like. And so those are two very different axes that I think we're all trying to work with.
Excellent, thanks, Andy. Liz, we're right on the top of the hour now, but do you want any just final thoughts? Will you like challenge people to go away and do something, or?
I guess the final thoughts I would just say is that having just finished a Hall of Failure paper that we wrote about this project for Games Learning in Society, which we'll be presenting in June, I want to say it's, we talk a lot about all the things that have gone well on this, and there are many things that have gone well, but it's not a magic bullet. It's not a set of, secret sauce that you could sprinkle on your students and suddenly everything will be better. It's hard, and it's hard to get it right, and it's not a simple solution to problems, but it is, I think, a potentially really interesting and powerful one for people that are willing to spend the time and the energy to do it well.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Liz. So thank you to Andy Phelps, thank you to Cliff Manning, thanks to Liz Lawley, and thanks to Vishal Sachdev. Do go out and check out play.rat.edu, and cheekily, I'm going to say you should go and check out openbadges.org as well. Thanks everyone for listening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.